Hi, I've introduced myself I think before, but anyway, I'm Don Price, and I wanted to talk a little bit about my background and about my life. I've had a very fortunate life, very adventurous life, both in the army and then after the army, 13 years as a professional soldier in the Rhodesian army, active in the bush war. Following that, 37 years in the safari industry, both non-consumptive and consumptive, but mainly on the hunting side with photographic operations as a sideline, and later leaving the hunting altogether, as most of us do, and going into the photographic and adventure trails. Hi, yesterday I was very privileged to go to a talk, presentation given by Fshanks, sorry, I'll have to read it here, Fshanks, B-O-L-S-C-H-E-N-K, Fshanks and his wife, I don't remember her name offhand, but they live on a farm just outside of Port Alfred on the way to Grahamstown, called the Three Valleys, and they do proteas, very successful with proteas, but they also have a sanctuary for damaged and hurt animals, and in particular the big cats. They have 3 lions there, a Siberian tiger and a black leopard, a melanistic leopard, which is actually going to be the subject of my little chat. But I'd like to give them a bit of exposure, and because I really enjoyed it and I think they're doing a hell of a job there. There's their card and their details, you could see there. So well done, the Fshanks. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about black leopard and that melanistic variant that occurs. On the leopard side, I just wanted to tell you that it's quite a rare, very rare in fact, occurrence to see these cats, the melanistic version, and I've been very privileged over my years to have been able to see 2. Years ago I was transferred in when Al Turl was killed by a lion in Boomy Hills. He was the OC of the tracking and bushcraft school at Kariba, and I was posted in charge to take over his place, and I had the privilege of working there with some great instructors. Rob Johnson was the sergeant major, and then the sergeants were Andre Rabi, Stretch Franklin, Henny Pretorius, Darryl Watt and Pete Clements. So I had these amazing instructors there, and one of them, Pete Clements, said to me during a break, I want to show you a special place I have in the bush. And we took off in our little Land Rover and parked off in the bush and walked a couple of k's into the bush off the road, north of the main road coming in from Makuti, and up this dry riverbed, and we came to the most beautiful little spot where there was a little pool of water and a fresh spring there, where the crystal clear water was, and growing over the pool was a great big tamarind tree, Tamarindus indica, a great big bulb of a tree like that, very old obviously, and it grew up, and you could literally run up, but it wasn't, the gradient wasn't very acute at all. So we went up the tree, and about 15 foot above the little pond, sat down on our butts and let our legs hang down, and we sat there quietly for several hours. And during this time, impala came down to drink, bushbuck, and then everything went very quiet, and we heard several animals giving alarm calls, alerting us that something was coming, probably one of the cats. The squirrels were chirping, and the tree hyrax were making their alarm calls, and the next thing, out of the shadows emerged this black leopard right below us. Beautiful, beautiful animal, a great big tom. He was very confident, looked around, he wasn't worried about, they very seldom do animals look up in the air, so we were up there and we were just observing, and it was just such an amazing experience. So that was the first experience, and then years later, I was working in northwestern Mozambique, actually, northwest of Pemba, for Lawiri safaris on the Legenda River, hunting leopard, and I've never been in an area where there are so many leopard. The concentration there is just unbelievable. Anyway, we had baits up, I had about 5 baits up, and we went to check the baits, not too early in the morning, about 10 o'clock, because you don't want to chase any cat off the bait. And as we approached the bait, this young cat jumped out the tree, and it was a female by its small head and shape of its body and the thickness of its tail and so on, and it was black. So that was the second black leopard that I ever had the privilege of seeing, but I have seen two, and it was very interesting yesterday at that talk to see that one just down the road from me. So I hope you found that interesting. That's the story on the black melanistic leopard. Hi, today I'm going to speak about a question that everybody asks when they first come out on a safari or on their first African safari. What weapon should I choose? What should be the choice of my weapon going on an African safari, on my first safari? Obviously, it's going to depend very much on your type of hunt that you're going on. If it's straight plains game, or if it's plains game and say one of the dangerous game animals, big five, buffalo or whatever. But regardless, I think there are a couple of things to consider. Firstly, with travel as it is today, it's such an awkward thing to travel and fly with weapons. It's harder than what it used to be in the earlier days. And so the less amount, or the least amount of weapons that you take with you, the better. And if I could give you my preference on a medium caliber would be something in a 300 caliber range, like a 300 Win Mag or a 3006. The 3006 is what I used to use, but they sort of outdated now. I used to have use a 3006, and then your second rifle would be a 375 in my book, 375 H&H. Now you could even go close. You could reduce that further, which is what a friend of mine would do, or Lance, on my advice. In the end, he would just bring out one rifle, and he would travel with a 375, and with the 375, with such an amazing caliber, you can take from the smallest animal in Africa, a little dik-dik or a little blue duiker, using a solid round, with a 375 to an elephant with the same rifle. And there's such a wide variation and selection on the weight of bullets that you get in the caliber. It's a great choice. Also, you must remember, when going to Africa, you're going to be in remote places. If you arrive at your destination on your hunt of a lifetime that you've saved up and you're going on, and you get there and your ammunition goes missing, or it is short, or something happens to it, can you replace it? If you come out with something like a very strange, one of these super calibers like a Weatherby 416 Weatherby, or a 460 Weatherby, or something like that, 378 Weatherby, the chances of getting any ammunition for it in Africa are next to zero. You cannot get that sort of ammo. So think about the ammunition. While we're on the ammunition, let me quickly just hint on one or two things on the 3006, and we could talk on ammo all day. My favorite grain bullet was a 180 grain bullet, and on the 375, obviously 300 grain solid. I'm a great solid man. Remember, when hunting, you don't want to damage your trophy, so why blow it up with soft nose bullets? And it's all about where you place the bullet, and that's how you kill your trophy, or kill your animal, is on the correct placement of the bullet. I do remember a number of very hairy scenes with people not wanting to listen and wanting to hunt buffalo with soft-nosed bullets. And I remember, to give you an example on my fear with soft-nose, with the old 375 Winchester silver tip ammunition. I think it was 270 grain, may stand corrected, but it would break up on impact on the skin on the outside of the animal. And I had a number of clients shoot line on the shoulder, and the bullet just disintegrated on impact. So soft nose, in my book, there's a lot more that can go wrong with it, whereas a solid is a solid, and that's it. Anyway, that's my recommendation for weapons to take on an African safari, either in the 300 range, a 300 Win Mag, or a 3006. And then for your second weapon, all you need, and you certainly don't need more, is a 375 H&H. Hi, I was going to talk today about, we've spoken about the weapons and stuff that, and ammo that you would take out to Africa. Talk a little bit about the kit and equipment, not too detailed, but a little bit of some stuff, some ideas for you to think on. If you're going to be, you must always know the time of the year you're going to be there and match your clothing accordingly. Obviously, if you're going to be there in the winter months when all the leaves and everything are dry, you want to be wearing light colored stuff, this sort of color, or even yellowy, that other khaki color. You don't want to have dark green shirts and pants and so on that you would wear in the winter, in the summer months when the trees are all green and stuff, because you'd stick out like a sore thumb. And also remember that with dark clothing you attract all the tsetse fly if you're in the tsetse fly area, so that's very important. I always carry a small set of binoculars on my body when I'm hunting, and I can quickly check out the trophies. But while we're on talking about binoculars, a little bit of a controversial topic, because a lot of clients always want the binoculars, and then you're out hunting and you see a great kudu and you say to the guy, okay, fantastic, take it, and you turn around and then he's got his pair of binoculars up and he's looking at the trophy. So I carry binoculars, and I have a big set of binoculars in the vehicle. But I don't like a client when he's hunting with me to use his binoculars unless he uses them when I tell him to use them, because for a big kudu bull, you've got 60 seconds. All right, then, okay, away from that now and onto the footwear. You need to have something on your feet that you're going to be comfortable with, and that you're not going to get blisters with. I used to hunt with sandals, but my feet were tough, and I enjoyed not having socks and so on. Derek Littleton, my pal, also hunted with sandals, and or something like a track shoe. But remember, track shoes are very soft. The bottom of them are quite soft, and in the bush there are a lot of very nasty thorns and stuff that'll come through. In Tanzania once I had very light rubber shoes on, and I had these thorns pierce my skin from underneath through the sole, and I had an infection within. The next day I couldn't walk, my feet were so swollen from those thorns. So be very careful, but have good footwear that's going to be comfortable for you, whatever you like. If you like a supporting boot, but boots are very noisy, so I tend to go with something light, a lightweight rubber boot. Or if you're going to be hunting mountains, yeah, sure, boots are okay, but other than that, boots are out for me. People tromp through the bush with boots with no concern and make such a noise, and that's not really how you want to hunt. Then a few other little things you'll need to take along, especially if you're going into tsetse areas. Some stuff like A1 Skin So Soft, which you rub on your stuff, helps to keep tsetses and other stinging items away from you. You will be given something like that peaceful sleep when you're there by your host and that, I should imagine. Also, what I always do is I always take a little thing of dog shampoo along with me. And if you walk in an area and you find that you're scratching afterwards and there are the infestation of pepper ticks, when you get back to the camp and you've taken all your kit off, put your kit to one side to go and have it washed immediately, get into a shower, put that dog shampoo on and let it wash right over your whole body and wash all those pepper ticks off. You smell like a dog for a while, but you don't have the pepper ticks. I think that's enough just to talk about a little bit about kit and equipment. You need something warm in the evening. You need some light longs in the evening. The old days used to say mosquito pants and a light jacket. I go with that. On hats and caps and stuff, I never wear a hat or a cap in the bush. Now it's coming and affecting me, but I used to use a face veil. This is not a face veil, but it's a similar thing, and I found it was a very good thing to have. I'd put it around my neck, or I'd tie it around my head, and when I came to a water point, I'd dip it in the water. If my head was hot, I'd tie it around my head. I'd put it around my neck again, inside my shirt to make me cool. A face veil or a scarf, a thin thing like this, cotton scarf, is a good thing to have. You may want to wear a hat. I have an old army hat that I used to wear. Not too bad, covers up the ears and everything. What I would do with that, as soon as you got close to the animal that you were going to take, you were going to be hunting and shooting after tracking up on it, I would always take my hat off and stick it in my shirt, because you don't want to be creeping up on the animal and your hat gets knocked over and in this position and you can't see what the danger is. Okay, so there's a few things for you to think about in your kit and equipment. Hi, I think one of the lessons I learned earlier on in my career was right after leaving the military. I was able to stay at Marangora with a friend of mine, Oliver Coltman. He gave me a little cottage there. It was called the Blue House, or the Stone House, and my late wife and I hunted from there into the Zambezi Valley. And I would work with Ollie. I was an honorary ranger, so I would work with Oliver doing work, whatever work came up whenever there wasn't a safari on the go. And one of the great lessons I learned from this man, and sadly he's passed on now, but he was a true bushman, and a very, very good hunter, and he taught me a lot of lessons. But one of the very big lessons I learned with him happened one day when we received a call from Chirundu police to say that 2 young African males had arrived there at the police station to say they had been the day before into the national park with their father to go fishing for barb or catfish, and it was illegal. They were fishing in the national park in a pan, but they knew the pan had lots and lots of catfish in it, so they'd walked the distance and they were fishing in this pan, and they got bored, the 2 young guys, and they left their dad there fishing, and they went back home. And the next day, when the father didn't arrive, they went looking for him, and they went back to the pan. And when they got there, they saw this lion, and the lion ran off when it saw them. And when they saw their father had been partially eaten, he was dead obviously, and his chest and his one leg had been eaten, they ran off, and they went and reported their findings to the police at Chirundu. We got the report. Ollie said to me, "Come on, let's go in." Zingai, his tracker, himself and I went in. He was carrying his normal 470 double. I had my 458 at the time, and Zingai, the tracker, wasn't armed. So we went into the shortest point on the main tarmac road going down to Chirundu, stopped off in his Land Rover, left it on the side of the road, and then walked into this pan. And it was Zingai in the front with Oliver next behind him with his double loaded, me with a 458 loaded. We had the custom that as soon as we left the vehicle, we'd always load one in the spout and have the weapon ready to go on with the safety off. We were walking in very, very quietly up to this pan. All of a sudden the Mapani sort of cleared away, and the bush cleared, and we realized we were coming onto the pan. And as we got up to the pan, the edges were very clean and everything, and we could see the water there, but on the left hand side there was the remains of this guy lying there, and this yellow image suddenly got up and ran, broke to the right, and went in a big half circle to our right. Anyway, it was the lion, and it ended up being a lioness that was eating him, and it came in a half circle around, and then it was doing this to build up speed, and it sort of took off, came around, and then once it had built up full flight in speed, it came straight at us. Zingai, like all of these guys, just suddenly disappeared. He was very clever. I was standing there with my rifle frozen. At the last second, Oliver crouched down, and I went down behind him, and this lion sprang at us. Must have been from 5 meters, maybe closer, and as it sprang, he shot it in the mouth with its mouth open, and the thing collapsed at his feet. Now, unreal thing to experience, and suddenly Zingai was there, and we were all excited, and the lion was dead, and everything went forward and saw the body. But the big lesson I learned from that day onwards was in facing a cat, a lion or a leopard, especially a wounded lion or leopard, whenever they charge, and this was a full-blown charge where the cat had actually generated enough speed to come in at full pace, you mustn't try and track it and shoot, this way. You're not ever going to be able to track it fast enough to shoot it standing up. You've got to duck down, kneel down quickly, and let the lion or the leopard come into the bullet. So it's running into the bullet, and you shoot it at the last possible moment, and that's the way you sort the problem out. So that was the lesson I learned from Ollie. Thanks, Oliver. Okay, as a follow-up on the Oliver Coltman story, where he so very coolly dealt with that man-eating lioness that I spoke of in the last episode that we did. We dropped down onto one knee and at the last minute shot the lion as it came at us with its mouth open. I related that story to an examining board. I was doing my professional hunter's license in Botswana years later, and I related that story in the practical interviews that we had at the end of writing the papers. And one of the examiners was a guy called Ronnie Krause, who later worked as a professional hunter there himself. And I related that story to him about, you know, when a lion or a leopard charges, the safest and the best thing to do is to go down into the crouch position and shoot it so that it runs into the bullet as opposed to tracking it standing up. Anyway, a couple of years later, Ronnie was, and it was filmed professionally, videoed. One of Johan's clients had a wounded lion, and Johan got a couple of guys to come and assist him. Ronnie was one of those guys. They were walking an extended line, and suddenly the lion, in very broken scrub country, and very all of a sudden the lion roared. They always do before they charge, and he came boiling out, came straight at old Ronnie Krause. Ronnie remembered in that story of me talking to him, and crouched down and shot the lion 5 meters from him as it leapt at him, and he killed it instantly. It collapsed on top of him, fell on top of him, and when the guys ran up, they couldn't see Ronnie, and actually pulled him out from underneath the dead lion. So it worked, and that was the story to show you how that followed up in real life. Later on, he came and thanked me at the Safari Club show, and I didn't know what he was thanking me for, and he said, "You forgot you told me this story years ago at the exam." Okay. Hi, I'm going to change the subject slightly on a bit on equipment to carry in the vehicle, in your vehicle and in camp. I have in this little container here, and this is a cheaper model, but it's a little stun gun. And I'm not trying to advertise anything, this is just to give you an idea of it. And I just want to talk about this little device. Years ago, I believe it was in probably 79, 80 when I was in Tanzania. I believe an old friend of mine, Robin Hurt, was the one who brought in a guy, some medical guy from UK, and the idea was to tour around and find out and be on alert, and if there was any snake bites in the country, they would fly the guy in with one of these stun guns, and he would treat the patient immediately wherever the bite was. So if the bite was there, they'd put the two prongs either side of the bite and then shock it and so on. And the idea being that the electric current in this is highly concentrated and kills the iron in the poison, in the snake poison. And I believe there was something like, I don't know, my memory serves me correctly now, but there was a large number of snake bite victims treated in the period of time that this guy was out there with the use of this weapon, this little weapon, this stun gun, and they all survived and they all made good. And apparently it went back to one of the Texans doing some quail hunting in the early days, hunting on his ranch with his favorite dog. His dog was bitten by a rattlesnake, which, you know, many rattlesnakes out there in Texas. When you're hunting, got to be careful for your dogs, and you wear those long high boots and so on. And his dog was bitten on one of the paws, and he was besides himself, didn't know what to do. And he thought, well, what he's going to do, he's going to use his jumper cables from his battery on his vehicle, because it was too far to get the dog into town, and put the jumper cables on the dog's foot around where the bite was, and he shocked the dog, and the dog, of course, he helped and performed, but he survived. And they reckon that was the initial stages, or the first time that they'd used shock treatment in dealing with poisons. Just to reiterate, I have carried them in my vehicles and in all my safari camps, and I've used them extensively, not on any snake bites. We never had any snake bites, sadly. Well, not sadly, but to test them on. But I did test them on scorpion stings, wasp and hornet stings, of course, and centipedes. And it worked almost instantly. We had a maid who was stung by a scorpion when she was doing the ironing, and she was beside herself. It was very painful, and we sat her down and we shocked her, and she was screaming a bit, but sort of 5 minutes later all the pain was gone and it was sorted. So a stun gun, the bigger and better one, a more expensive one you can get, the better, is a good thing to have in your safari vehicle and in your camps. I'm going to give you a bit of an army scene now. Get away from the bush and game a little bit, a bit on the lighter side. I think the best part of being a paratrooper is actually having the wings on your shoulder and having being able to wear the little wings badge on your breast, above your breast pocket, whatever. Because for me, the actual parachute training and the lead up to jumping out of an airplane was quite a performance. It was like you had to do this pre-selection course first of all, and I was 32 years old, and it was like doing an aerobics course on steroids. They just rush you around all over the place, and then we went on this para course, and there were 3 of us that were in that same sort of age bracket. The third guy was old Bill Blakeway, who is our padre, and where he found his strength and energy from, I have no idea, but the other guy was Sean Van Strans, and we'd go there and we'd have just a workout from 5:30 in the morning. We'd be gone and we'd come back 5:30 in the evening. I was so tired in the evening I'd fall asleep in my plate, and we'd run, jump, fall on the ground, roll up down the whole day. Eventually, and at lunchtime would come around and all the guys would double away to go and get lunch. We would sit there or lay there and try and sleep if we could. We were so buggered, the 3 of us. And eventually it came to the time that we were going to jump out the aircraft. Remember, we were jumping with the old T10 parachute that was sort of left over in Rhodesia by the Brits. Came from the Second World War time. It was a small canopy, a 14-foot, so if you weighed a little bit more than 150 pounds, you creamed in very sort of promptly into the ground. I remember guys saying to me, "Oh, don't worry, it's like jumping off a 10-foot wall, and you just hit the ground and roll over." Well, it wasn't like that at all. It was like jumping off a 10-foot truck going at 25 k's an hour, and that's what it was like to me. And then, after doing all this training, 6 weeks of it, and being ultra fit, we eventually did the jumps, and we had to do a night jump. And before the night jump came along, I went to the sergeant major, my sergeant major, little Brit guy, Mervyn, and I said to him, "Hey CSM, tell me about this night jump. What's it like? What can I expect?" He said, "Sir, don't worry about it." He said, "Every jump for me is a night jump. I jump with my eyes closed every time." But the night jump is actually very nice, and I enjoyed it. And then the next jump that we did was our qualifying jump, and out came my late wife and my nephews to come and watch the big hero jump out of an airplane. Being the major or the senior guy, they have little sense of humor, the parachute instructors, or great sense of humor from their side, and they made me jump last, and we had this big container full of sand. And so it meant that I was last out the aircraft, so I had the furthest to carry my sand and parachute and everything else to get to the wings parade. Everybody was waiting, and I think my little wife thought I'd died on the route, but because I was so late. But anyway, that's parachuting for you, and very chuffed I've got my wings, but the training wasn't for me, and the whole build up to it was another story. I was laughing even before I got going, but anyway, this goes back a very long time ago to when I was a brand new second lieutenant, and we were doing border control duties in the Zambezi Valley. We were based up at Mashumbi Pools and had to do these patrols, and I took a bunch of guys off with me, and we took off on a 4-day patrol. And one of my guys at the back of the patrol was a guy called Chalky. I'm not going to hide his name because I don't think there's any fear of anybody finding out which Chalky it was, because there were about 10 Chalkies in the Rhodesian army. and but it's nothing bad anyway. It's just a humorous story. So we went off on this patrol, and we were sneaking along the banks of the Hanyani River, and all of a sudden there was this loud kaboof, and a big spray of water. You know, shot had gone off, but shot into the water, and we all hit the deck, and then nothing happened. So we shouted around, everybody okay, everybody okay. We got up, and then somebody was saying, Chalky's not well, sir. So I turned around, and we pulled our Chalky up. He was covered in water, and he was laughing, and right then we saw that at his feet was his R1, his rifle, his FN, and it looked a bit like a banana that had been peeled. The barrel had peeled backwards, and I said to him, geez, like, Chalky, what's going on here? What happened, man? And he said, well, sir, I was just gliding along, I was just sort of moving along, and I checked this flat dog's brew, Leguan, you know, related to a crocodile, the flat dog, and he was underwater, and I just thought I could pull him, man. And he must have, when he was looking over his barrel, misjudged the depth, whatever, and put the barrel just in the water, and when he pulled the trigger, the rifle exploded and the barrel burst outwards like a banana peel. And he's very lucky that the rifle was strong and that the bolt, the breech block at the back didn't come and take his head off. Anyway, that was the story about Chalky and the Leguan, and he had to, of course, appear before our OC Major Lloyd at the time, and had to pay for the barrel, but I all thought it was very funny. He had to pay, I think, 68 pounds in those days for a new barrel. I want to go back to the elephant training that I did with Willem, because, you know, that's such a vast subject, and I'm here concentrating more on a professional hunter training than on training for individuals like sports hunters and so on. You know, they can glean something from what I'm going to tell you, but I got so much out of my time there with Willem that I think I need to carry on a bit more and tell you there. Obviously, when you're going to hunt an elephant, and his whole point was pointing out the shots in that book, is that you need to learn the animal's anatomy, and it's a big animal, and the vital, you know, statistics are very small comparatively. I mean, the heart is about that size, the brain is about that size, and so the hip joints and so on are smaller compared to the whole elephant, and you've got to know exactly where to place those shots. So I think very important to anybody who's, especially on a PH side, who's going to be hunting elephant, not only to just go out and be able to say, well, I've passed, I have shot an elephant. That's not really enough, doesn't even touch sides. You've got to learn the anatomy of the elephant. You've got to learn all the angles that you would shoot it from. You've got to learn what the animal's habits are, how you would approach it. You know, an elephant every day goes out and feeds, and it eats a tremendous amount of food every day, and it has to find water, it has to drink water every day too. So, you know, you need to research your animal, find out the habitat where you're going to be hunting, the elephant that you're going to be hunting, where the water points are, what kind of vegetation it is, try and establish their feeding pattern and so on. And then when you get up to getting onto hunting the animal, when you get up to the animal, I like to, but when I get up to, after having followed up on the elephant, when I get up to the elephant, I like to stand off from quite a distance away with the wind in my favor, and just glass the elephant and just have a look and see how calm and collected they are. There's no need to rush in close and go and have a look and disturb them and get them all excited. And I know a lot of young PHs do that and take the clients in, and it really is wrong in my opinion, because it gets the elephant all excited. I like to go in, have a look. If there's nothing worth shooting there, I slip away. The animal doesn't even know that anybody's been there, and that's how it should be with a client. When you're going to shoot an elephant, even if you're going to shoot it on your own, you need to get up as close as you can, bearing in mind keeping the wind in favor. The wind is your biggest thing. And then even take another 3 steps closer after you think you're close enough. You know, 10, 12 paces, 15 paces max to take your shot, to be sure of that one-time killing shot. And you come up to a point where which I call addressing the animal. You can sneak around behind bushes and so on, and the elephant's just in front of you, but now you've decided, okay, that's the guy you're going to shoot. You step out into the open when you're at the right range, and you address the animal and you take him, and that's how it's correctly done. I went on with Willem to do the full 100 elephant there with him over the year, and learned a tremendous amount. As I said before, with the heart and lung shots, with the brain, frontal side, 3/4 and all the rest of it. The running away shot, which is a very good professional hunter shot actually, on the hip, because the elephant's wounded and he takes off and you hit him on the hip and he goes down, and then it enables you to be able to get up to him, because otherwise they would be gone. And Fani Pretorius, an old hunter friend of mine who also sadly passed on now, that used to be his favorite shot with a client when a client had wounded the animal. He had a 460 Weatherby and he'd just stick it on that hip and the animal would sink down and he'd go and finish it. A lot more to talk about on the elephant thing. You know, if you shoot an elephant side on for heart and lungs, it will always run the direction it's facing. So you don't want to leave some people around in your group on that side in front of the elephant, because the elephant, when he's wounded, is going to run straight into them. When you shoot it heart and lungs, it always falls on the side it was shot. It's very strange. You know, it doesn't fall on the opposite side. It falls the side that you've actually put the bullet in. That's the side it falls over onto. And brain shooting elephant, you tell the way the elephant goes down as to whether it's dead or not. If the legs in front just sort of appear chopped out from under it, that's dead. If it goes down on its back legs first and then down on its front, it is not dead, it's wounded, it's going to get up again. So bear these things in mind, but it all come about as you get more and more experience. But we'll talk more about that when we go into the actual hunting of the elephant. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other things associated with elephant hunting, especially in tribal areas, because a lot of the concessions border on the tribal areas in Zimbabwe and in Namibia and Zambia and Tanzania and so on, Mozambique. You've got tribal people around where the elephant occur, and so it's very important that you take into account these people's feelings and their cultures and their history and so on. You know, what I'm talking about directly is about witchcraft. And when you go into an area, I used to always go in a day or so before the client arrived. The client would fly in or drive him in the next day or whatever, and you'd send out the trackers and your guys, maybe a skinner or whatever, to go and visit the local chief and go and just say, look, you're in the area and my bona's here and we're going to be hunting, and you want to meet the Nanga and we want to show what are the practices, what are the cultures here. And normally before you go hunting, it is the proper etiquette to go to the Nanga, the witch doctor, the Sangoma, the whatever you want to call him, Nanga, and go and pay your respects. And for that you'd find out who he was the day before or whatever, a couple of days before, and you'd arrange the meeting, and you'd go there with your client. They like it, and you try and encourage them. And it might go against the grain with some people, and they say, oh, well, that's a lot of rubbish, and I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to pay for this. Hey, you're missing the point. You've got to appreciate the guys that are with you. You've got to appreciate their culture, their background, and you know that witchcraft is steeped in their lifestyle, has been for centuries. So it's very important to them that they are happy with you and with the hunter, and that you are happy in the surroundings, in their eyes, with the local witch doctor and so on. So you do it for them mainly, but it's a good thing and it's the right thing to do. So you go. To illustrate the story of witchcraft and elephant hunting, I want to relate a little story to you. Down in the southeast lowveld of Zimbabwe, I was hunting an area adjacent to Gonarinzor National Park in the Turupasi Tribal Trust Land area, and we had been to see, as the custom I've just explained, the witch doctor, and in this case it was a little lady witch doctor, Nanga, Shangon woman, and her nickname was Pencil, I think, because she was so skinny and upright. And anyway, the trackers all called her Pencil. And we went to see her and gave her the gifts and everything. And the next day had to go back and see her. She had gone into a trance and rolled around on the ground and everything. And the next day we went back there and she said, right, you've got to go and hunt in this particular area along the fence line up in this southeastern corner, because that's where the big elephant are at this time. So we thought, okay, well, we'll check out the other part that we were going to go to first and have a look, and then we'll make our way to this other area. And we did just that. In the beginning of the hunt we saw nothing, and we went to the other end which she had recommended, and sure enough there were 15 bulls, but inside the national park, about 400, 500 meters inside, and we climbed trees and glassed them out, and there were some really nice bulls there. Anyway, every day, the client was a friend of mine from Austria, Michael, and every day, and he was looking for a really, good elephant, something sort of 60 pounds or above, talking ivory weight obviously, and we would go there to this area and we would always see the elephant on the other side. And we hunted everywhere and we walked and we did miles on foot and we saw nothing. So we went back to the old Nanga, old Pencil, and we said to her, look, well, this is the problem. She said, no, you haven't, you must go back there and these elephants will come. You just leave your tracker, I want to talk to him. So we went to the vehicle and then Yanni went to go and speak to her, and eventually he came back and he said, right, let's go. So we went back there. And I said, what's the big secret? What's the story? And he said, no, the Nanga, old Pencil, has said, if we get there and the elephant are inside the national parks, I know what I must do. So I said, well, we're not allowed to go in the national park. And he said, no. He would just go into the national park. He wouldn't take a weapon or anything with him. He's just going to go in there with nothing, and he's just going to go up to the elephant and he'll come back. So we said to Michael, well, let's have a look, Mike, and see what goes on. And sure enough, we got up there, the elephant were in the same sort of general area. Maybe they'd moved a couple of kilometers left or right, north or south, but they were still there. And Yanni went through the fence, the big cable fence, and he approached the elephant, and he picked up a piece of dung from one of their dung piles, and he came back with a bit of this elephant turd. And he came across the fence, and he said to us what the Nanga had told him, what Pencil had told him. He must put this on our side and he must burn it, and they will smell it and they will come and see. And I said, yeah, well, and I said to Michael, what do we do? He said, well, hey, we've only got, this is the last day, let's do it and see what happens. So a lot of problems to get this very fresh elephant dung alight, but we got it burning eventually by putting some other grass around it and everything, and burning and smoking, and we moved back a couple of k's, put a guy up in a big tree. 20 minutes later, sure enough, the guy gave us a call and said, well, they must come. The elephant are all across the fence. They're all on our side now. They're all coming and they're moving towards the Limpopo. So we quickly got our rifles and we went and we got down there, and there were all the elephant. And I said to Michael, so what do you want to do? I looked at them and I said, the biggest jumbo here, Michael, is about 60, 65 pounds. I said, not going to be anything bigger than that. And he said, well, hey, it's my last day. This old lady has shown us where they are, told us exactly how to get one here, and said, I think we only owe it to her. We're going to shoot this elephant, and then she can have the meat, the choice pieces, and so on. So I said, okay, fair enough. And I said, my guys will be very happy, and of course they were. And we went up to the elephant, took him up, and then approached for a side brain shot. He was shooting a very interesting rifle made in Belgium, funny enough, made by Belgium gun maker, Wolf, and it was a huge thing, like 11.3 or something, and a bull of a thing to carry. It weighed about 14 pounds. Anyway, it went up and about 8 to 10 paces, bang, side brain, straight down to this bull, and it was in fact 62 pounds a side. So he was very happy. But that was a little case of demonstrating and illustrating how this Nanga thing and honouring their customs and so on can work, and how it also works with your staff. A bit about judging elephant now. How do we know it's a trophy, and how big is it, and so on. And a lot of these things, in my eyes anyway, take time for you to get the experience. I've always, from experience, judged elephant from what I saw there. And I always remembered what my old dad used to say to me: if something jumps out at you and it looks great and it is good, it's rather like a beautiful woman walking down the street. You say, wow, you know, that's great. You see a great elephant trophy, you know immediately it's good. So that's how I've sort of looked at it, but I have also learned the alternative ways. And if I can take a tape measure, I always think in inches and feet and inches because I was old school. So let's have a look. If you can try and judge for yourself that's 20 inches going around with a tape measure, okay? If you measure around the elephant's lip, obviously you can't do it when he's standing out there, but you've got to judge that. So this is where I'm saying you use a tape measure to get in your head and give you the right measurements, the right, you know, that is 20 inches. It's like, and females can tell you that's 36 inches, you know, that's for the sewing thing. But anyway, so we use a tape measure, or I did, and that gives you 20 inches. And if it's 20 inches at the lip, and say there are 2 feet sticking out, 2 feet sticking out, that would be 40 pounds a side. Of course, there are a lot of other things that come into it. The tusk is not the same thickness all the way till the end. If it tapers very quickly, then of course the weight is going to decrease very quickly. A lot of elephant, or all elephant, have different size nerves, and the nerves going to come into account as well as to how much the ivory weighs. On average, you're looking at 3 to 5 pounds I've seen from elephant nerves, but it's also very dependent on what areas you're hunting. Like if you're hunting Angola, Namibia, Botswana, the ivory tends to be very thick. The elephant are very big in body, and when you first see the elephant, you see the tusks and you think, oh well, that's not so good. I've actually seen ivory that, you know, 18 inches, 2 feet sticking out, but it's been like 30 inches at the lip. So that's a 60-pound elephant, and it doesn't look like an elephant trophy that you have in your mind where you want to see the long ivory that comes from like the Ghana Resort area or northern Mozambique up there next to the Niassa game management, big game reserve area. So it just depends what area you're hunting in, and that's the way that you would judge, in my book, how you would judge the size of the elephant and the trophy you were looking at. Another couple of little things to go with the elephant hunting on little points is when the elephant is down and all the sort of shaking hands is done, I always used to take a piece of chalk out and I would mark on the elephant the lines that I wanted the skinners to cut. Now in the Tonga areas, up in Binga and that sort of way, Zambezi and so on, and lower Zambezi, the Tongas used to have a big spear. It was about a 6-foot spear, and 3 foot of it was just the blade, and it was like a cutting knife, like a big a spear, a knife with a long handle on it. And you could draw the lines on the elephant. For example, when the elephant's laying down, normally it's divided into like 3 panels. The head's taken off, and then there's 1 panel over the shoulders, 1 panel over the stomach part, the guts part, and 1 panel over the rear legs. And you'd mark it with a chalk and then a line down the spine, and the guy would stand on there and he would cut with this big knife or spear. It looks about the sort of length of a Maasai spear, but of course a Maasai spear is a lot thinner and softer steel and metal and so on. This was a thing probably made out of spring steel, out of a car spring, and it worked very, very well. Of course, the other thing that you need are hooks, big metal hooks, to be able to pull the skin back so that you can shave it off away from the body. And then a couple of little things with the elephant. Once we shot an elephant in a tribal area, I'd get my trackers and they'd cut branches and put it to one side. And when the people got there, the locals, all the meat would go to them, obviously. But it had to be organized, otherwise they'd swarm all over the elephant, and you can't have that. So you get all of them to sit down in one place. You picked like out 5 or 10 guys from the group that are big and strong with their axes and knives, and you use them and you give them instructions on how to skin the animal. Now, certain parts of the elephant, by tradition, have to go certain places. I was taught in those areas that if you shot the elephant on the side and he fell on his whatever side, if he fell down on his right side or left side, that side that he fell down over went to the witch doctor or the nunga in the area. The trunk, which was considered a delicacy, which is extremely tough, and I have no idea why it's considered a delicacy, but that would go to the chief in the area, and it would always be kept to one side and would go to the chief once it had been skinned out. Obviously, if client wanted a trophy and he wanted the elephant caped, which is a major job and a hell of a lot of work, but the trunk would always go, that meat would be put aside and go to the chief. So you would get everybody, and once this elephant was skinned out, the feet taken off, the head taken off, and you would position big lumps of meat on this bed of leaves that you would lay down there, and at the end you would call everybody up and they would get in a long line and they would come forward. By this time women had arrived with big dishes and so on, and you would give them a lump of meat and they'd go, and even if they came around in a big circle and got seconds and thirds, that was fine until the whole thing was finished. And once it was organized and done like that, then you would leave them and they'd have a big party for the whole night. You'd hear them sitting around there dancing and singing, and they were so excited that they had that meat, and they would have that meat for about 3 months because they would dry it and make it into like a tong that they smoked over coals. Okay, those are a few points on elephant hunting. Oh, let me just say lastly that the meat from elephant is actually very nice to eat. It's not bad, it's very tough, and from my experience was the side of the head has the finer grained meat, and as you go down the body, the grain of the meat gets very tough. As you get to the rump and the backside, it's really strong and very coarse grain, and it's not very nice to eat. But starting on the side, the cheeks and everything are not bad to eat, and the meat is light pinkish in color, but it's not bad to eat. The tail is pretty good as a oxtail cut into the joints, but you have to cook it for a very long time because it's actually very tough. Okay, I hope these things have helped.